Disclosure is a totally different thing from contact. Contact's a little different. Contact implies that they have a motivation for wanting to talk to us, and I think the answer to that is probably no.
Welcome back to the podcast then, Richard Dolan. Richard, welcome back.
Hi, Andy. I'm always happy to be here with you and your audience.
Yeah, and we were going to record this last week, and we're going to do a whole dive into Chinese ufology. I prepared that interview, and then things changed last week around the world. Now, I've watched your recent video. I'm sure many folks, Richard, watching and listening to this may have caught up with your piece around Obama and Trump. I'll give the really quick recap for anyone under a rock that hasn't seen or heard the comments. The quick,
Sure.
too long, didn't read version is President Obama was on the Brian Tyler Cohen podcast. He was asked in a speed round, do you think aliens exist? And he said, yeah, they're real, but they're not in Area 51. There's no underground base, unless there's a huge conspiracy against the President of the United States. This was then obviously followed up online by Obama having to backtrack a little bit and say, look, I was talking about statistical probability, etc. I did not learn anything about the existence of ET during my presidency. Again, you can dig into that if you like, that careful language and wording. Of course, then sitting President Donald Trump is asked about Obama's comments. This is the interesting part for me, where Trump, and we'll get into this, Richard, Trump says on Air Force One, Obama's made a big mistake. He's given away classified information. He shouldn't be saying that. He's asked if aliens are real. He says he doesn't know. He doesn't like getting into it. We've heard some of that before, but it was a different reaction from President Trump. Then 24 hours later on Truth Social, President Trump follows up with a post to say that he's basically getting all relevant agencies to identify and release, and I think the language there again is very careful, any files related to UFOs, UAP, aliens, and ET. Bang. That's followed on a chain reaction now where we have the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, commenting on this. Secretary of War, which is still an incredible title to say out loud, Pete Hegseth, is commenting on this. Representatives Anna Paulina Luna, Representative Eric Burleson, and on, is now involved. This has made worldwide news. This is the biggest reaction I've seen to this topic since David Grusch. And I can say that, especially from a UK perspective, Richard, it has hit these shores and it has hit the mainstream news. What's happened in the last week, and I'll start with the fact that you yourself said in your own video, you weren't particularly enamored with the comments Obama made as being anything special.
No, I thought they were banal, uninteresting, nothing. It's a weird thing about our community. I don't know if I mentioned this on my YouTube video or if I said it in any other place, but it's like our community, if we can call it that, the UAP or UFO community. We're like dogs under the dinner table, desperate for any kind of scraps that fall our way. So Obama makes this utterly conventional, uninteresting statement. It could be false. It could be a lie. It could be true. Where he says, well, yes, aliens are real. But of course, any conventional astrophysicist today would say this. This is not an outrageous statement any longer. In terms of probability, you talk to any scientist, they'll be like, oh yeah, very likely. There's an overwhelming probability of life in the universe, alien life. And Obama, he didn't really even veer from that in that interview segment that we all saw. It was just, it seemed like a very casual conversation, kind of the end of the interview, as you mentioned, the lightning round thing. And he just said this. It really did sound relatively off the cuff. A lot of these presidential interviews, you really don't know what is something approved beforehand or not. But this one actually struck me as sounding potentially spontaneous. But he said nothing. And yet the world turned this into some, Obama says aliens are real. I thought, oh my God, just eye roll city. And then when he made his follow-up statement on Instagram, where he emphasized that he wasn't stating anything unusual here, that really, I thought, should have ended the story there. He said almost the same thing on Jimmy Kimmel years ago. He's on the few occasions when he mentions a UFO or alien topic, he says the exact same thing. There's nothing new when Barack Obama talks about this. So I thought this is a non-story. And then, of course, as everything happens in the United States when it comes to Donald Trump, the great variable of American politics and society, he's the great stress test of the system. I often think of that. So Trump gets asked this question and, of course, turns it into a story. I mean, I laugh even now thinking about it when I visualize this in my head, and I laughed out loud when I watched him say, he's giving away classified information. Like, wow. So thank you, Donald Trump, because that actually was a pretty neat thing to say there. That was a little Easter egg for us. Now, the question, though, is you're dealing with Donald Trump. So this is a guy who he is spontaneous. He's whether you love or hate the man, he will speak before really truly thinking these things through. So he just tosses this thing out there, and you really don't know, like, is he speaking out of genuine knowledge? He clearly had no understanding of what Obama really said. That was obvious, because if he had listened to Obama's statement, he would have realized there was nothing classified that Barack Obama gave up in his interview, nothing of the sort. So Trump's assumption is what makes this interesting. He has the assumption. He's been president now for more than 5 years, right? He had 4 years in his first term. He's a year and some change into the second term. So this is a man who's been president of the United States for more than 5 years, and his automatic assumption is that UFOs are classified. That's interesting. That's very interesting. That's different than determining how much he actually knows. He always hints that he knows more than he says, and he did in that Air Force One interview, as I recall. But and then, he made me laugh again when he said, "Well, maybe I'll help Obama out and declassify some of this." That's classic. It's just classic Donald Trump. So that is a story that is interesting. And then, of course, as you pointed out, the follow-up on Truth Social, the directive. Now, there's a few things about this I think I mentioned in my video. I'm sure, I have no doubt other people have mentioned the same thing. So, A, there's no known executive order here. We don't really know what the actual orders have been to the U.S. federal government. Tulsi Gabbard recently just did a tweet on this and provided a little bit of clarification, but really not enough. So what she said was, well, in our administration, we've declassified a number of these files, mentioning Martin Luther King Jr., JFK, RFK. Did she mention Epstein? She must have mentioned Epstein. And
she actually didn't. She said
she
JFK,
didn't?
RFK, MLK, Amelia Earhart, the Russia hoax and weaponization.
Right. And not Epstein. Interesting.
Not Epstein.
Well, Trump fought really hard against, like, he campaigned for releasing it and then did a 180. Maybe if you want to chat about that, we can. Not that I'm some expert, but it's interesting. Anyway, he does a 180 on that. So so she didn't put Epstein in there. That's interesting. So then she says next UFOs, UAPs. So, how far will this go? I don't really know. I mean, he's looking at the Department of, I don't really know if it's been changed formally to Department of War. I know Donald Trump said it is, but I'm not 100% certain where that whole thing stands. I'm not really sure. In any case, Department of Defense / War. The fact that Tulsi Gabbard as DNI makes a tweet on this gives one the hint or implication that this may involve the intelligence community, including maybe the CIA. That would be very significant if it does, and if it's actually anything more than a performative exercise that they go through with this. I don't really know. I mean, as far as I've been able to see, the only department that really seems to be responding to this is Hegseth, the Department of War or Defense. So if the CIA is involved, that's great. I haven't heard a thing about, for example, the Department of Energy, which is never discussed in any conversations about UFO, UAP secrecy, but it needs to be. It's extremely important. And of course, I haven't heard any hint of investigation into private contractors and that whole
Yeah.
private ecosystem there, which is very important. So I'm not like I don't want to minimize this. If there's a genuine, let's say, an executive order by Trump that orders some review and examination of federal U.S. federal government records relating to UAP, UFOs, and that's great. Do it. But the U.S. government is like a big ocean liner, and to make it turn around or change course, that's not easy. It's very difficult, and I think there's no question there would be maybe some mid-level managers who are like enthusiastic about it, and others who would be much less so. So it's really hard to say how responsive would the U.S. Bureaucracy actually be to this. It's not that a U.S. president can simply snap his fingers and everyone hops to their task. It doesn't work like that. It didn't work like that in Trump's first term on a number of issues. He had a very big problem getting the federal government to do certain things that he wanted. And I see no reason to think it's any different this time. So we'll see. I mean, it's hopeful. It gives some cause for hope, but really whether it will amount to anything, we will just have to see. I have a feeling it probably won't. That's not to say that it won't spur some additional efforts on the side. List members of Congress might be encouraged by this. In fact, they already are. They appear to be. And it's not impossible that this directive could encourage, let's say, new potential whistleblowers to come forward. I mean, there's a kind of ripple effect that may come out of this that may not be related to the exact intent of the directive itself, but it could have ramifications that go beyond that. That could be hopeful and beneficial for the cause of transparency or disclosure. Not impossible.
So I am with you on Obama's original comments. I was surprised it got so much traction online as quickly as it did, because like you say, including the Jimmy Kimmel appearance, James Corden's show, he's made comments about, and James Corden's an absolute pain in the arse. We apologise to America for giving him over there, but you gave us Ruby Wax and folks like that. So, but on the Corden show, he made similar comments about things flying in the sky that we don't know what they are, performing incredible maneuvers. This just seemed to take flight for whatever reason. It went viral in every sense of the word. Perhaps timing. It played to Trump's ego, where I think you're right, and I don't think I'm going to upset anyone on any side of the fence here when I say Donald Trump quite often likes to be in the know on any subject he's asked about. I don't think there's anything I've ever heard him not give quite a confident statement on, regardless of how much he may or may not know about it. And I think we all know folks like that. On this, however, it was strange, that reaction, because it was part defensive, part I'm in the know. And I'm talking about that moment on Air Force One.
Yeah.
And to say he made a big mistake, it almost comes from, is that from a place of knowledge? Is there any chance here, and is this being kind of hyper speculative, that Trump in the past has been advised when it comes to this topic, because he's never completely poo-pooed it. He has dismissed it as being not something he believes in, is more or less a direct quote, but he's always then backed up our men and women in the military have reported things, great people have seen amazing things, maybe there's something to it, we know his son and in-laws are interested. Has he potentially been advised, Donald, for all the things you want to do, stay away from this topic. Just dismiss it. Just ignore it. Don't go into detail. And for whatever reason, something's happened here that after that comment, we don't seem to quite know. And you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Richard, but he makes that comment in Air Force One. And then less than 24 hours later, we've got this directive to identify and release, not declassify. And I'd like your thoughts on that language. We're going to identify, I'm going to direct the appropriate agencies to identify the records, not declassify. Now, is that important?
Did he say relevant? I think relevant UFO.
Yeah, I've got the exact thing here. Based on the tremendous interest shown, I'll be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying and releasing files related to, and the language here is pretty clear, alien and extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomena, not anomalous, and unidentified flying objects. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so your question is, well, first of all, I would say this, I'm only speculating here, but I would have every reason to believe that Donald Trump has been interested in UFOs for at least a good portion of his life. The reason I think so, I mean, he's been a businessman for his career, and very likely the whole UFO subject was very peripheral to his success. I mean, it really had nothing to do with it. But he's very much an out of the box kind of a person in many ways. He, as a presidential candidate, he was probably more friendly to alternative media than any other presidential candidate I can think of. In other words, the people who are kind of in the periphery and not in the mainstream. So that alone would make you wonder that he could have been bumping into the subject much more. Plus, he was a private citizen all these years. It's not like it was incumbent upon him to dismiss the UFO subject as it would have been had he been a public official for all those years. He wasn't. He was just a private citizen. So I could easily see that he would have this interest. Plus, he's a nephew of John Trump, the guy who in the FBI at least gained access to or found the files of Nikola Tesla when Tesla died in 1943.
Yeah, it was in the hotel, wasn't it? He was in the hotel when Tesla died. He went into the room, took the files. Is that part of the story correct?
I don't know the full story. I know that he was there, and I know that he must have known about it, and that Donald, his nephew, probably talked to him about it at some point. Like, I just can't imagine. He's a family member. Plus, we know that Don Jr. is definitely interested in the subject.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, who's the recently deceased? It was a late newscaster, very good friend of Trump's, and forgive me, I can't remember his name, but he was absolutely interested in this, and I know spoke with Trump. So Trump's had people around him who clearly are sympathetic to and believers in this phenomenon, and that's not trivial either. So I have to think that on a personal level, he would have some interest in this. And then, of course, as the president, what has he been briefed on? What has he been able to determine? Trump is such an interesting president because he really, the people who love Kennedy and hate Trump will hate this comparison, but he's like Kennedy in a lot of ways in that he made himself an enemy of a huge portion of the intelligence community and let's call it the deep state. And that happened to Kennedy. And this has happened to Trump, especially in his first term. Maybe a little bit different in this time around, but so it's very we really don't know how much has been briefed on. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's had a substantial briefing on this subject. I'm purely guessing, and that he probably does know a few things. Does he know the heart of the matter? Does he know everything? I have no idea. But it would stand to reason to me when you look at the seriousness of just United States military UFO encounters over the years, that Trump could very well have been briefed on some significant things there. And, whatever he thinks about Russia and China, I don't think he would be foolish enough to think that all of those UFO sightings were caused by the Russians and the Chinese.
Yeah.
It's just not credible. So he could very well believe that UFOs are real. I suspect he does. I suspect he does believe that. His instinctive remark on Obama's statement, calling it a big mistake and saying he shouldn't have said that, that just reinforces that opinion. If Trump really thought UFOs were complete ridiculous nonsense, you have to ask, why would he have reacted as he did when he was told of Obama's statement?
It would have been easier to dismiss Obama really at that point and just laugh about it and say, nonsense.
Yeah, like, what a fool.
Obama. Yeah.
Yeah, what an idiot. Like, he could have said things like that, but he didn't say that.
Yeah.
So,
what gets me more from this, because I could have quite easily seen a scenario where Obama says what he says, Trump gets asked about it, dismisses it, and it goes away. However, we've got Trump following up in an interesting way, which again, people may listen to this or watch this. They're going to be UFO friendly, clearly, and they'll look into it the same. But other skeptical folks might think, well, he's not really saying much. But there's been quite a reaction off the back of it, which that's got me scratching my head a little bit in an excited and an intrigued way. That you have Pete Hegseth today has quoted to a journalist, "We have our people working on this right now."
Mhm.
When he's asked about it, he actually, I don't know where he is quite, I've seen the clip, but he sort of laughs for a second, but then goes quite serious. And he's like, yeah, you know what, this is really interesting, and we do have our people working on it. Anna Polina Luna has been posting all sorts. I know she has for a while on her X account, but she's posting, quantum warp bubble travel pictures and all that kind of stuff. You've got Representative Jared Moskowitz on the Democratic side of things, and normally it's the Republican side, obviously, who deal with this, especially for folks in the UK who aren't as up on their US politics. I learn a lot about US politics through the UFO topic. Moskowitz the other day on that same podcast where Obama made his comments said they expect this week to have a bipartisan press conference on this very matter. So again, and then Tulsi Gabbard, DNI, mentioning we're going to be releasing these files.
Yeah.
There's something we're going to get from this. Now, what we get from it could be a whole bunch of nothing. But what do you foresee coming from this at this moment in time? And bear in mind, Richard, we're talking 6 hours before Donald Trump's State of the Union address, where he could bring out one of the greys or confirm we are not alone in the universe. Unlikely as I think that's going to be. Where do you think we're going to be sitting in a couple of weeks' time?
You're raising a lot of very interesting questions that are coming up in my mind here. So we'll stick with what you're asking. Where do I think? I don't expect that you're going to get bombshell revelations coming out of a federal search on this. I just don't think so. Federal agencies have a long history of resistance on this. And not only that, it's entirely possible that there could be an honest search of federal records that doesn't turn up what we're looking for. At this point in the game, we've had a significant migration, I would say, of the a lot of the control over this phenomenon, it seems to me, out of even federal hands and into the hands of contractors and perhaps even other private hands. I think that's very likely the case. I mean, within the U.S. federal system, you have what looks to me a very fragmented custody access. And I'm talking custody of information and even of hardware. I mean, think of this. So you have the Defense Department or War Department. You have the intelligence community. That's totally different. And you have a variety of agencies within the intelligence community, not just CIA, but you have Navy intelligence, you have Army intelligence, Air Force intelligence, and a number of others. And then you have the Department of Energy domains, which have their own black programs, special access programs within the DOE that nobody ever talks about, and which has a whole legal structure that ensures deep secrecy on matters pertaining to it. And we have every reason to believe and to know that the DOE is involved in the cover-up of UFO information as well. So you've got that. It's a scattered kind of architecture. And then you have the whole reality of compartmentation and need to know. And the reality is that need to know overrides rank. If someone does not have a need to know, it's not clear how a federal executive order is going to access that information if it's on a strictly need to know basis. A lot, in other words, and there was nothing in Trump's statement that gave me reason to think that this was going to be a completely sweeping executive order that would override need to know. So I just have to assume that this is going to be a surface level, not even a sweep, just dusting the furniture a little bit. I think that's really what it is. Presidents rotate. They're gone every 4 years. The compartments, those persist. And these programs that were born secret, essentially, even during the atomic era, 1940s, 1950s, when the whole secrecy architecture was really being put into place, they have survived every potential attempt to out them for more than 80 years. And I don't see anything that Trump has said, or even that's come out of like what Hegseth said or anything else, or Tulsi Gabbard, that makes me think any differently. The whole idea about long-term continuity migrating to private contractors. I mean, we can't say this is at the level of proof, but it is a level of a lot of evidence, a lot of testimony has indicated this. So that custody, even when you have some federal oversight and funding for a program, it doesn't mean that the U.S. government actually has custody of this information or these items. So, and then there's a whole array, I think, of proprietary barriers and legal contract structures, and then you have the whole question of classified corporate intellectual property. What actually gets exposed here? I don't think any of that's going to get exposed. So a president can push federal records, I suppose, but still, while you can still miss the core holdings, and I think that's entirely likely. So what I would predict, if you ask me what I think there will be a reasonable level of procedural compliance with whatever directive he makes. And we don't even know what was this. He's just asking Hegseth out of private favor, or is there an actual executive order? I have no idea. But let's just say the word comes down from Trump. We're going to look into these files, so there'll be some procedural compliance, sure, with probably some limited substantive information that may come out of it. Not impossible at all. I would say very likely low sensitivity types of data, or maybe even things that are already known for all we can tell. Whereas I think if it's real material, if it's explosive stuff, I have to think it's going to be rooted into exemptions or compartments or places that won't be seen, so that officials may truthfully say that they have nothing because they're not read in. So I don't think that's unrealistic. I think that's probably, we've had all kinds of historical patterns or historical examples in the past that have hinted to this one way or another, to show that basically senior officials or presidents are not always able to gain traction on this matter. Trump wouldn't be the first. So that's what I think. I don't expect this to be a breakthrough, but that doesn't mean it can't be valuable or useful in its own way. And I do think that there will probably be some things that come out of it. So I'm glad he made the statement, and I just hope that it's more than what I think it will be.
Couple of things still on this. If you were one of those gatekeepers, then if you're deep in the DOE, if you're part of that legacy program, if you're covering this up, and you're the roots of this cover up, are you even raising an eyebrow to what this noise, the creation of this noise, and what's happening off the back of it? Are you lifting your head away from the desk, or are you just kind of laughing under your breath?
Oh, I think that if it were me, if I were one of those guys, I'd be lifting my head and I'd be paying close attention. This is not the 1960s or 70s or 1980s. We're in a very different age now, where this is now a subject that is on the table. Doesn't mean that most of the world even still pays attention. I think most of the world is still not paying attention to this, but more people are paying attention to it than before. No question about it. And some explosive information has come out. You mentioned David Grusch. Absolutely. David Grusch was a genuine explosion into this domain that had to be taken seriously and had to be dealt with. And Grusch basically was dealt with, by the way. As soon as he came out with his incredible statements about technology and biologics, what happened? You had the character assassinations on him immediately, and he just faded into the background. No one's really talking about David Grusch anymore, despite the power of the statements and his position to be in a place of some knowledge, and he's still been ignored. So, but the people who are deeply knowledgeable and are attempting to control this information to the extent possible, I have no doubt they're paying attention and just making sure that they can manage this situation. Right now, it's still quite manageable. It's quite
You make
manageable, I think.
you make a really interesting point though about what could come from this, and there could be something valuable. What I hope is if it might be a case the door gets kicked open to something, maybe Grusch opened the door slightly and let us see a glimpse of light on the other side, and it got closed again. Maybe this time it gets kicked open, but very quickly closes. But in that time, what can come through that door? Do we get more whistleblowers? Does this galvanize people out there already who are trying to work on this? Does it give people the courage to speak up who maybe perhaps didn't before? And I think something you touched on earlier, there is a massive Epstein cloud hanging over the world, the Western world, especially right now, that I don't think can be ignored. And folks might talk about it for, we talked before the show, Richard, about the old YouTube algorithms and whatnot. It's popular in media for clicks and shorts, but it is right now the biggest story on the planet, these Epstein files. And I remember before all that came out, there was the jokes about, will the aliens be used to cover this up? And it's a hell of a curveball to cover up. And we won't go into it in detail because, again, there's some really disturbing and disgusting things in those files that people clearly have been a part of. But if you were going to distract a massive population, then what better way to do it than dropping the old, look, here's the fact is we're not alone in the universe? Because I think
Well,
for a lot of folks, that does change the conversation.
that'll only work if they actually give a substantive amount of information, which I don't expect. But no, you're bringing up a good point with the Epstein connection here, because anyone who has looked into this even a little bit with the UAP directive here, and there's been a tremendous amount of suspicion about this whole thing being a diversion. It's like, don't look at Epstein, look over here, look, aliens, see? So that's a very widespread opinion, and it there could be truth to it. I'm not going to say that there's nothing to it. It's incredible how cynical we have all become over the last couple of generations. But I'm not yet convinced, frankly, that this is a ploy for people not to look at the Epstein revelations. Again, it only seems to work for me if you actually get anywhere with it. And I just don't know that that's going to happen. What was I going to say? Oh, as far as the whole distraction thing, though, I think it seems to be a very widespread reaction among many people. First of all, there's a lot of people who are skeptics or non-believers of the UFO phenomenon. So all of them, probably 100% of those people would say that this is a ploy, because their answer is, well, there are no aliens. That's all nonsense. And so this has just got to be a lot of, and in fact, there's a lot of very, very brilliant mainstream or even alternative political analysts who have commented on this. And they're kind of mystified, a lot of them, because they don't follow this subject. They're like, what is Trump doing talking about UFOs? Is he the best explanation I heard from that perspective is not that he's trying to do an actual head fake on us, but rather that he's just under extreme stress and pressure, and it's getting to him, that the pressure is getting to him. He is under extreme pressure. I mean, right now, the impending attack on Iran is front row center. That's actually literally the most significant thing going on in the Trump White House right now. Will the U.S. start, at least from my perspective, a completely needless war in the Middle East for no reasonable justification, in my opinion? And you could see, like, there's a debate within Trump's cabinet. Like, Gabbard does not support it. J.D. Vance does not support it. I think that's pretty obvious. But my understanding is that pretty much everyone else does around Trump, and he's got a lot of pressure to do this, despite the fact that it's probably not going to succeed. It'll probably fail if he does it anyway. So he's in a trap geopolitically relating to Iran, and he's been put in that trap, and he went in there willingly. So the whole idea of him under stress and strain, and talking about the whole UFO UAP thing, like, I could actually believe that's part of it. But I think there's more to it than simply that. It's, he's not talking about this simply because he's under stress or strain. why they're doing this. Like, what's the actual motivation? What does Trump really think about this? Why does he really do it? I don't know that I haven't listened to anyone who's convinced me that they actually know. What is Trump's genuine motivation here?
Hmm.
I don't know. I think we're all just kind of guessing. I suppose I have this idea that he has a genuine interest in it, but that's completely separate from what he feels he should do in his duties as president of the United States. Why this is happening now? I suspect, though, that this is a response, maybe more than anything else, to the genuine public groundswell of discussion that has been growing and growing and growing on this subject. And it's just not something that anyone, even the White House, can just ignore forever. I mean, it's possible. I don't know if it's likely or definite, but if Kamala Harris had been elected president, would her White House also be making a similar statement at this time that, we're going to declassify UFO, UAP record? Maybe not, but it's not impossible that pressure from below would cause any American White House administration to move forward on this. I mean, these types of discussions they're interesting and they're fun, but I mean, I'm sure there's people listening right now thinking, these guys are just talking about something they have no knowledge of. And that is true. We don't have knowledge. For my part and for your part, we've thought about this UFO subject for many years. It's true. We have certain thoughts about it. I've thought about international geopolitics now for longer than I've studied UFOs. I don't know if deeply, but for at least 50 years of my life, I've studied politics, and it's of great interest to me. But I'm just speculating here. Well, I would say, though, that the real thing that we have to look for is not personalities, but the structure and the architecture of the secrecy. UFO secrecy is embedded into deep-seated laws, bureaucracies, offices that are protected through special access programs that are all based on a need to know. So that unless this directive, however officially or informally it has been given, can penetrate into the world of hundreds, only within the DoD alone has hundreds of these special access programs. I have no idea how many CIA has. I have no idea how many DOE has. Unless his order penetrates into that whole ecosystem, I cannot expect that we're really going to see any genuine revelations.
To be fair, Richard, I think it's fair to say we don't know is a legitimate scientific answer and argument, and I don't think that's appreciated enough in the UFO topic. And I'm sure in mainstream science, the early days before dark matter and black holes were discussed widely, there was a few scientists on the fringe who people thought were cranks and kooks talking about the idea that there's something invisible pulling the universe together and holding it all, and everyone else thought you're a crackpot, this is nonsense, it'll never catch on. Maybe we are just those crackpots and cranks, the people watching this, listening to this, because we're talking about what could be down the line at a time where there's this chance that we see the conversation really move on leaps and bounds. I agree with you that the impending strike on Iran is very likely to happen. And I think that is something that could stop those journalists at the White House asking about UFOs and alien life, because they're going to be under pressure from their editors, from the people who run the mainstream news media, who are going to be saying, Richard, did you really go to the White House and waste your 2 questions asking about bloody alien life when we want to know about the Ayatollah and the attacks in Iran and how many warships have got going out there, what missiles are being used, all these rumors, and you're talking about UFOs. That is a career killer still, and it's going to be in that moment. So it's got to be handled carefully. And I could as much as I'm intrigued and excited now, I could foresee in a couple of weeks' time or a couple of months where even your Hegseths, your Lunas and Burlesons, when they're asked about this, perhaps are saying, look, Iran's on the table right now, so we really have to pivot and concentrate on that as a more pressing issue. We've not forgotten about that other stuff. And it does slowly fade away again. But we're in that moment where right now, like I say, we don't know. One thing I would like to ask your opinion on, though, and when you talk about potential evidence, to move away from speculation while still speculating about potential evidence, I'm going to say, is the idea of material being accessible. Now, the UFO too big to move is a story that has been in the news for a couple of years now. Ross Coulthart mentioned it with Jay Anderson on the Project Unity YouTube channel,
Mhm.
and it caught fire. It's been followed up on a few times. Eric Burleson has commented about it just the other week. I don't know if you saw Burleson and Greer were both on the news together. Quite a combination. Um, Re-
I caught
Eric
Greer's
Burleson,
statement.
yeah, Burleson obviously being professional, and I can't comment on location. Stephen Greer might as well have been holding up a massive placard saying South Korea and Anyang. What's your take? One, I'll get your take on that statement from Greer in that setting and how that sounds. But what about the idea we do have crashed craft around the globe so big they can't be moved, and there are
Mhm.
locations that congressmen and women could go to and see this stuff? That, I mean, that is smoking gun evidence, even in this day and age.
Yes, there's a few really good things that can come out of any kind of genuine search. If there's a lead or a hint of the type of craft that you're referring to, that would be very powerful. And I think, honestly, possibly the best thing practical that could come out of this initiative by Trump is that the UAP Disclosure Act could get a fourth attempt to go through and actually have some teeth this time. That, I think, would be a very positive development. I think
Hmm.
the UAP Disclosure Act, it's either been blocked completely or um, stripped of most of its power. So it hasn't really had an opportunity to go into place in the way that it was designed to. And I still believe, I think it would be quite valuable to have that piece of legislation in place. Not that that's a cure-all or a panacea. Nothing is, but it would certainly be very good to have in place. The statement by Stephen Greer that I'm familiar with is the one that he said he briefed the Trump White House. Which is that the one you're talking about here?
No, there was two. Dr. Greer's had a few appearances. He was on with Burleson, where he said that when Burleson said he couldn't name the location of this alleged craft that had a building built over it
Oh,
outside
okay.
of the US, Greer basically went, I can, South Korea, that's at least one of them, blah, 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 blah. Then he has gone on separately on record to state that he wrote a speech. And I don't want to be unfair and biased here against Greer. I've given my opinions on Dr. Greer. There's one thing to say I wrote a speech for Donald Trump to give to announce the existence of extraterrestrial life, but to frame it as if Trump has the speech on his desk and is ready to give it is very
Yeah,
different from
that's
me writing a speech just now and sending it to the staffers and saying, give this to Donald Trump.
just such cringe. Honestly, what else can you say about something like that?
It wasn't a good look, I don't
So
think at all.
so cringe. I'm just going to pass on any further comment on that. What the hell can I say
But in terms of that
beyond
location,
just
what's
rolling
your
my eyes?
yeah, away
Who
from
could
Greer
believe
then?
this? Who would believe that Donald Trump's like, oh yes, let me have your speech, Stephen Greer. I really want this.
Yeah.
Like, it's absurd.
But
It's absurd.
what about the location though, Richard? In terms of potentially South Korea, Anyang.
Hmm.
I've just done a deep dive with researcher Ryan Perky, who lives out in Hong Kong, and he's talked about the area, the base. It's incredibly interesting infrastructure. How it was built is quite unique, and the tunnels that surround it as well. It's 50 kilometers from North Korea. Really interesting place. I would encourage folks to go and check that one out if they've not watched it yet. It's premiering as we record this on YouTube, so a few days ago. But yeah, interesting idea. What's your thoughts on that location, but also the idea these craft may be dotted around the globe?
Yeah, I think. I mean, Greer could be correct when he says South Korea. That's not impossible. There's a variety of places in the Far East that would not be impossible. South Korea, even Japan, would not be impossible. Quite possibly. And we've heard about Indonesia. We've heard. I think this is something where we could be looking at a kind of a global distribution network. I mean, after all, craft seem to be acquired in different parts of the world. First of all, they don't all come down in the United States. So I think it's entirely possible that that South Korea could be legit. I don't know. Don't know what to say about that.
I think I might have your answer to this next question before we move on to some listener questions on this. But is this part of a bigger strategy towards disclosure, the moment we're in right now, or are we just living in a moment that's going to pass and be another flash in the pan we look back on?
Well, you have to ask who's running the plan, if there is one. Not Trump. Is there a group behind him? The Zodiac group? Are they? Which, by the way, there was a reference supposedly of Zodiac in the Epstein files. I haven't heard any other follow up to that, but who's planning the disclosure? We've heard this for years and years and decades and generations, that there's a slow drip. Maybe that's actually possible. In other words, it is not impossible for me to think, go back 50, 60, 70 years. Let's just pretend we're in the 1950s and we're part of the group that knows the full import of this phenomenon. Back in the 1950s, people had no idea about how strange this phenomenon could be. Not a clue. To them, it's like, men in metallic craft flying in their craft to Earth. There was really no sense that these beings could manipulate space and time, or had the ability to manipulate us cognitively, or engage in other kinds of high strangeness. So if we knew that and the rest of the world didn't know that, we might think this is going to take generations to acclimate the public as to just how freaking strange this whole thing is. And so you could at least envision a relationship that the intelligence community would have with Hollywood, say, that would slowly roll out movies and other media that would kind of dip the public a little deeper into it. I'm not saying that's definitely the case, but there is a relationship the CIA has had with Hollywood and continues to have with Hollywood on all sorts of things. I remember like 10, 15 years ago, was it Chase Brandon? He was the supposedly the CIA Hollywood liaison, and I think he was a real guy. I think he was the real deal, and I think he probably did work with Hollywood productions on certain things. So, to answer your question, is this part of a plan? If I were, I try to put myself in the position of these guys. Like, if I were in charge of maintaining secrecy, I would probably know that this is a secret that's not going to last forever. And so the question would have to be, do I want to control how this secret comes out and the speed with which it comes out, knowing that it's going to come out at some point? Do I want to be in charge of the spin? I probably would. So I could at least imagine that this could be part of a plan, but who's running it? I don't think this is Trump's plan. I don't think it's Donald Trump. So I guess I will answer your question by saying I don't think that there's a disclosure plan actively in place by the Trump White House. Now, if there's some other group behind, the strings, behind the scenes, pulling the strings, maybe, but I don't yet see that. I don't think there's going to be I don't think we're going to see a disclosure in the next few years. I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't believe it. I think there's way too much to lose. There's not a unified movement within the U.S. federal government on anything, literally on anything, particularly the Trump White House. The Biden White House, for all of its many flaws, and they were many and legion, was a much more unified White House than the Trump White House. Trump's got people going in all different directions, and Trump himself goes in all different directions at times. So you don't really know. So there's disagreement on all kinds of things, whether it's geopolitics or domestic politics, and very likely on something like this as well. I just don't think there's a unity. So I think we have to be in the habit of looking at factions rather than unified directions. I don't think that exists in the modern White House. I don't think there is a unified direction.
Let's dive into some listener. I was going to say, we'll dive into some listener questions, Richard, that people have sent in. Thank you to everyone who sent these in. I've had close to 100 for Richard across this interview, and we're going to be talking about ufology in China in a separate follow-up too. But listen, on this one, Richard, we'll go with Peaceful Space Duck, which is a great name. Question for Richard. Given the upheaval the world has experienced since 2010, tail end of the economic crash, Brexit, COVID, the war in Europe, the cost of living crisis, Trump, a post-truth world, and creeping authoritarianism, does he
Wow.
still,
Yes.
yeah, quite a list. Does he still believe disclosure would have the same level of impact that he previously speculated on in AD after disclosure? Or is there a chance people will just kind of shrug and say, okay, add that to the list of weird shit that has happened to me this week?
Yes and no. Before I answer that, I just want to mention I'm going to plug our China segment. And I want people to understand that when we talk about China, whenever you release that,
Mm,
that's going to be extremely relevant for the world of disclosure. This is an extremely relevant conversation. Chinese ufology and China's position on the matter of UFOs. Just saying, I just want to whet the appetite for that because I'm a believer in that conversation we're about to have. Okay, so to answer this individual's excellent question, I say yes and no. Like, I don't like the person is absolutely correct to say so much has changed in our world since I co-authored that book 16 years ago. 16 years ago, I wrote 80 After Disclosure with Bryce Abel. And at that time, the world hadn't completely fractured into the ideological camps that we see, into all of the craziness that we've had since then. It's really true. And then the other thing that he points out is, which I fully agree with, is that everyone's kind of siloed now. We're all in our own little and ideologically manicured and managed little digital bubbles, where we just watch the things that we want to watch. So I think it's for ordinary people, disclosure and thoughts of, oh, aliens are here might not have kind of the impact that I would have thought that it did 15, 16 years ago. However, the devil's in the details, man. So if there's a disclosure, it really matters. Like, what is the disclosure? If Donald Trump, I can almost laugh thinking this, if he were to actually go at the podium and say, yes, I saw an animated kind of claymation version of Trump talking about aliens, which was hilarious. But anyway, so if Trump were to go actually live and say, like, I've spoken with these aliens, or we know the aliens are here. The question really is, though, what is revealed? What is actually revealed? Are there bases? Is there a base 10 kilometers from your house? You've got all kinds of rumors that there's underground alien bases. Are any of them true whatsoever? They got to be near somebody. And if
yeah.
there's an alien base near your home, that might affect you. That might actually be something that you consider important. If it comes out that a lot of these 2 a.m. sightings that people have of low hovering objects over their neighborhood are actually true, that might get people's attention as well. Like, in other words, it really all hinges on what is revealed and what an engaging public is able to ascertain as a result of this. Do they look like us? Are they doing invasion of the body snatchers? Are they manipulating human society in any way, shape, or form, as many have claimed? I don't know the full answer, but these are questions that inevitably will rise. And then the other thing you can damn well expect is that the ideological divide that we are all experiencing in our world today will affect this disclosure in terms of attitude toward these other beings. We love them. We hate them. They're invaders. No, they're here to bring us to the next level of whatever it's supposed to be. Like, that will be a divide. There will not be agreement on that, guaranteed. And there won't be an agreement either as to how humanity should best respond to this. So it'll open up a can of worms, a can of whoop ass on all of us, because we won't know how to respond in a unified way as a population. It'd be too much. So I think it would be disclosure will be a mess. There's no clean disclosure that I think will happen, no matter who is president of the United States. And now that we're moving into a definite multipolar world, I mean, without question, even 10 years ago, we could still pretend that we had basically, it was the US's world and everyone else just inhabited it. But that's not the case anymore. China and Russia are leading the whole BRICS movement away from the US dollar. You're clearly looking at a world in which those two nations and several others, India and a number of others, are saying, no, we're really not going to be controlled by the United States. We're going our own way in certain areas. So it's not really clear that even the United States president has the kind of gravitas and authority that he would have had even as little as a decade ago. So, let alone 20, 30 years ago. So I don't know that disclosure could even be a unified global process. It wouldn't be. And when we get to talking about China, we'll see exactly why. I'll just say here, the Chinese government will absolutely never, ever, ever, ever allow UFO disclosure to get past a certain place in its society. It's just not going to happen. Not as long as the Communist Party is in power. They'll never allow it to happen. So how this will all work out, it's a great question. And I think it's not quite the same as it was in 2010. But the fundamental, this is still a very big reality that will have a massive ripple effect. And that has nothing to do with the fact that it may lead to energy transformations. It's entirely possible that there are energy implications in the science of UFOs or UAP that we have not yet learned about, but that may come out in the aftermath of something like this. And that would be transformative. There's a lot of things that could be transformative about this. So I wouldn't underestimate it.
Yeah, really good question. And I'm going to follow on from that. So a few weeks back, Adrian sent me a question. He was suggesting for a potential roundtable, and he just happened to name you as an ideal guest for said roundtable. And I'll get back to the roundtables in a few months, folks. But I'm going to put you on the spot, Richard. As we sit now, the way the world is in 2026, in a perpetual state of war or on the brink of war, famine the way it is, geopolitics the way it is, as you've mentioned just before, what are the few pros and cons of disclosure were it to happen? Well, let's use today, State of the Union address. Trump says, folks, we're not alone. And it goes from there. What do you see the pros and the cons being?
Well, there's a couple of really obvious pros. First of all, I'm making an assumption here, but if there's a truthful disclosure to any extent, where he's giving even, let's say, a sliver of the mountain of information, that's definitely a positive, because it will, I think we are always better served as a global community in having genuine truths laid before us, and especially if they're important and powerful ones, as this one is. So, you can't really make intelligent decisions about the world and your place in the world and your country in the place of the world without having as many important facts in place as possible. And this would be an important fact. Probably along the lines, part of that disclosure, there might be revealed the fact that you probably have had an international Cold War going on in terms of ET technology. It's one thing that David Grusch claimed, and he's not the only one. So there would be a lot of probably unsettling information that would come out as a result of it that we still need to hear. But as I was saying before, it's not really clear to me that we as a species would have a unified perspective on this or unified opinions on this. There would probably be a lot of discussion from more of the have-not nations of the world for saying, hey, so what do you know about any of this technology that might benefit us? Are you hoarding it all yourselves? That very likely could, at least presumably, that could be an issue that comes up. And I think, honestly, if there was anything significant that was disclosed, it would, we're talking about the Epstein revelations now. I think that this would have the potential to surpass even that. How long have you guys known? What's the technology you have? How many people have been killed with this? Like, as Grusch claimed, that there were people who were killed as a result of the UFO secret. And how deep does this go? How far does the reality go? Like, these would be questions that would have to, I have to think, even in our, relatively comatose age of mainstream media, that there would be enough of an alternative community that would be asking some hard questions about this. How far does this go? And I think it would be hard to avoid. So whether that's a pro or a con, I don't know. It would be disruptive. It would certainly be disruptive. And that might be the only thing that saves us, is a massive disruption to our global system, or it might be the thing that takes us down. It's too much disruption to our global system. Tough question to answer.
Yeah, I've always said, just on the whole blue sky thinking of disclosure, and I'm literally talking to the man who co-authored the book about after disclosure, the idea that any alien entity is going to come down and say, here's a little box for you all that gives you free unlimited energy. You
No,
would be paying you would be paying a subscription service to Tesla or any other company who would manufacture and build the equipment to give to you, and you would just pay that. You plug the box in your home, in the wall, and bang, there you go. All your energy is now clean and quote unquote free, but you're still going to pay for the equipment. You're still going to pay for the rental or something. That's exactly what would happen. You would have new insurance premiums, all that boring stuff would all apply.
Totally. I agree with you completely there. Although it is entirely possible, if there really were free energy to come out of it, or let's say super abundant, I would have to think the cost eventually would have to go down significantly. So it might be much more affordable. But the real point I want to just make here, if we don't get a chance anywhere else, disclosure is a totally different thing from contact. Totally different. Totally different. So disclosure, we could get to a point in our society where we as a species make the determination and have the proof, and we maybe have scientific proof that, yes, extraterrestrials or non-human intelligences are here and they're operating. That's disclosure. Contact's a little different. Contact implies that they have a motivation for wanting to talk to us. And I think the answer to that is probably no. I do not believe, and I say this simply based on the behavior of the craft that I have studied extensively in my own research over many, many, many years. I've studied thousands of UFO reports and USO reports, the ocean-based ones. And there's a certain behavioral pattern that you see with these. And it does not include the idea that, oh, yes, well, we want to help you and we're going to educate you. I mean, you do hear people making this claim, but it's not working very much, is it? Like, we're really not moving along as a species very well in that regard. We are, if I had to guess, I think that they probably are looking at us thinking, these guys aren't going to make it, which is a really good chance. Like, we may not make it. So what are they doing? They're collecting what they can collect, our DNA, our life forms, waiting for the next big climactic shift, whether it's we go back into another ice age or we heat ourselves into wherever, whatever's going to happen, we're probably going to be looking at within the next century or less, maybe more, but not much more, probably a significant infrastructure crunch that's going to cause a lot of problems to human civilization. This, I believe. And they probably see this. They can probably see the signs. So they're looking at us thinking, there's nothing we can do to help these people. You're looking at, we don't really understand ourselves as a species, in my opinion. I don't think we do. Like, we're the species on this planet that learned how to use tools and learned how to kill animals way bigger and stronger than us by sticking sharp things into them. Like, we figured that out. And so we developed a mind that strategizes, that uses tactics, that's all about planning. And like, we gamed the entire global ecosystem because we figured this out. And we're now at the top of it, and we're taking it all down with us. And I'm not even saying it's climate change. We just can't help what we do. Species extinction is extremely rapid under human domination. We've already, replaced and displaced so much of the global natural biomass. You really have to wonder, like, how much is going to be around in another century or two. So I think they got to be looking at us thinking, oh yeah, these humans have really shit the bed.
Yeah.
So where is it going to go from here? I think they're watching us, and there's nothing that they could do to fix us. Like, this is the thing. Like, how do you do that? You can make us smarter. That's not going to happen. You're going to make us less territorial, less aggressive. It's not going to happen. Less competitive. Not going to happen. The problem that we have is that we developed over many thousands of years into these separate languages, separate cultures, separate everything. And now globalization's brought us all together. So no wonder we fight. Of course we're going to fight. Where we don't have equal access to resources on this planet. Never will. Never will. It's never going to happen. And so there's always going to be inequality, injustice, and that's it. We unfortunately have this really, really dangerous utopian streak among us where we have this fantasy that we're going to fix all the world's problems. I got news for people. We're not going to fix all the world's problems. It's not in the cards. So, and then we get angry because we haven't fixed all the world problems and we want to blame someone. But we have it's a systemic issue. It's structural issues. It's not because of capitalism. It's not because of some bad people at the top. There will always be bad people at the top. That's always going to happen because our system allows for it and almost demands it. And the nature of the competitive nature of human species, human society is always going to make for strife and difficulties and competition. And I mean, the best that I hope for is that we minimize these things, but we're not going to eliminate them. And I don't really see, for my part, how the human species is really going to be able to fix this. We keep expecting a Hail Mary, Deus Ex Machina to fix everything. Elon Musk is now saying, well, it has to be AI or otherwise we're sunk. Well, maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong, but AI, even if AI prevents some of the catastrophes that he's thinking, it's not going to prevent them all.
Yeah.
Because we are what we are. So I think the aliens, they're looking at us. They operate clearly on a different level cognitively. That alone, like how are they're going to slow themselves down? Really? They might have, if they have mastery in any way of time and space, which it looks like they do. How are they going to talk to us? How would we talk to a species 500,000 years ago, like early, proto-humans who are very intelligent, but don't know any of the things that we know? Like, we wouldn't be able to talk with them. We would have nothing to say to them without their heads just going boom. And I suspect it's similar with any of these visitors. And this is why they're not just out there talking to us. There may be a couple of limited one-on-one engagements, as some people have claimed. Yes, totally possible. But on a wide basis, they're probably thinking, we're in a little garden here. Don't step on the flowers. Don't step on the plants. We'll damage them. That's what I think.
It's a really interesting thought and a conversation we can dive into another day, a lot of what ifs. But there is that whole idea of what if it's different? And I like to think of what if things aren't the way we think they're going to be? What if the contact we have now, the sightings, what if they stop? What if these things decide to go away? And like you say, if there has been some kind of mass harvesting of DNA data, cattle mutilations begin to slow down because they've got what they need. People often ask me quite regularly, are alien abductions still happening at the same rate? The data would sort of show that they're not, but that can be for all kinds of different reasons. But let's just say they've got, again, what they need. Perhaps they are just moving on, and what we're left with now are the autonomous drones of anything that was here physically, just saying, look, let's just keep an eye on it, because like you say, we're done with this planet. It is what it is. We can't make any differences. We'll keep an eye on them. These nuclear fleets that are flying around or operating in the sea. Let's keep an eye on those, but we're going to move on to somewhere else. And that's a horrible. People talk about somber in the UFO conversation. That's a somber and sobering thought that we are past the point of a more intelligent species thinking it can interact, it should interact, or even it wants to help us, and they've just gave up.
It's impossible to help us from any outside perspective. I don't care what anyone else says on this. My mind is made up, but I actually do believe this. I think we're not fixable in any realistic sense. So if they are here, by the way, your thought that they may have come in and they're like, okay, we're done. That's not impossible either. Although when I look at, we really need to do a careful statistical breakdown of UAP sightings as are recorded in all of the public databases that exist. I'm not convinced that sightings have gone down, but of course, the question is, what are the quality of those sightings? There's still a lot of sightings that take place currently that make me just say, wow, like that looks very difficult to explain conventionally. Not that it couldn't be explained conventionally. So what really would be needed for me to fully agree with you is I would have to, or someone would have to do a very persuasive statistical breakdown to show that actual decent quality sightings have declined. I'm not 100% sure about that. In terms of abductions, I'm aware of several abduction claims from the 21st century. So it's not that they've stopped entirely. Again, assuming that they are legit to begin with. I think they are, but it's a tough subject to know for sure. I mean, when you're dealing with something like abductions or alleged abductions, you're dealing with people who, even under the best circumstances, most of them do not remember every single facet of what happened, of what they believe happened. Some probably do, but I think most don't. There's gaps. So again, it looks to me that there's cognitive manipulation going on there. So what's actually bleeding through and what isn't, I don't always know. But it's not impossible that they are here for a certain period of time. For example, what I do personally believe is that the whole meme of ancient aliens has been radically, dramatically overplayed to an extent that's really unhelpful to our understanding of this. And I'm sorry to say this too, but I talk to the Ancient Aliens TV show people frequently. I know them all, but I just shot for them another. I think they're on season 18 now, if I'm not mistaken. Incredible, but that I don't think. I think that we have really radically misinterpreted the what we call evidence for ancient visitation. I tend to think that we've been monitored for a long time, but very low key, very low level. When you look at a lot of the old ancient UFO reports, like really, I would encourage people to seriously study them with a cold eye and not just saying like, I want to latch on to everything, because I think instinctively people want to think that we want to have ancient aliens because somehow they think that strengthens the case. I hear people saying this all the time. Oh yeah, they've been here forever. No, not necessarily. I'm not really 100% convinced. There's some persuasive, or at least let's say some intriguing ancient accounts. Yes, there are. So I wouldn't throw it out. But when you're looking at quantity, there is no comparison that the quantity really starts to jump first in the 19th century, and then really and truly during and immediately after the Second World War. That's when you see it. It's a qualitative transformation. Now, I asked myself why, and I have my theories on this, but basically all I'm saying is their level of engagement has not been consistent throughout the ages, in my opinion. So they decided, I think, that during the 19th century that humanity was way, way worth watching now, much more than in the past, which would be true. Because starting in the 19th century, we now had organized scientific inquiry, we had organized industrial capacity, and we were then truly beginning to reshape the world. It was a lot harder to do that prior to that. And that increased, of course, in the 20th century, in our ability to destroy life on this planet increased exponentially during the 20th century. So that would make us very much worth watching. If anyone had an ability to observe us from afar, that's a big if, and he'd need some kind of, presumably some faster than light system of maybe some kind of entanglement, maybe through some level of consciousness itself that they just know, like a disturbance in the force. I don't really know. There's a lot here that I don't know, but it looks to me when I look at the data that there was a major jump in the 19th century and then in the 1940s. And I think it's a response to us. I think it's a response to humanity. So if they come, they see us, they're like, oh God, they're going to be doing computers. Yep, they're doing computers now. They're going to be doing nuclear weapons. Yep, there it is. Wait till they go wireless. And like they could probably foresee all of the developments. And they're like, we can see that there's going to be a crunch here. So let's harvest what we can harvest and get the hell out. That could be.
In the same way you watch a child, oh, they're going to crawl, they're going to walk, they'll start making noises, now they can talk. Yeah. And then what kind of person do they develop into based on all the different interactions they can have? And then you kind of let them go out into the world on their own. Richard, I've got 2 more listener questions here before we get to China, so we can fly through both of these. Matthew used the contact form on the website, so thank you, Matthew, for that. He says, what is the most incredible thing that even Richard couldn't get verification on to put in his book or series? I think he means USOs, but he believes is true.
I've come across some pretty wild ideas and notions over the years. Some of them I believe, some I can't prove them all, but I don't think that I've ever held any of them back. I think at this point in the game, I've probably said everything that I think may be true. But one of the things that I've come across, and other researchers have shared this with me from time to time, is this idea of totally human-looking beings that are not human. They look like you, they look like me, but they're not from here. I don't really know how true this is. All I can say is that if I were them, I would want to do something like that. I would want my own human-looking avatars mixed into the population. I would absolutely want to do that. Without a doubt, I would want to. And it doesn't seem impossible to me on a number of levels. You could unwillingly hijack someone, put a little implant in there, have them do what you want them to do, position them as like your own little spy, or you could get them willingly to work for you, or you could grow your own humans. Like, we hear these claims from researchers like David Jacobs, who wrote about this, the creation of the so-called hybrids. But not just him. There's been a number of other researchers who have stumbled onto this. In my research, I have stumbled into it. The whole idea of human-looking aliens. Is that true? Yeah, I think it could totally be true.
I think you're going to see that play a major part in the Spielberg movie in June, just from the trailers and the spots.
Oh, is that right?
I think from looking at it and starting to break things down, you've got this idea of people, whether it's avatars or whether they just look human or can replicate human features. I think that looks like a big plot point in it, which will be interesting to introduce that in the kind of movie.
50 years ago, that would have been very difficult scientifically to convey, but not as difficult anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got mastery of much of the genetic codes of our own species. And no, you could see all kinds of genetic manipulation going on where you could kind of create what you want, or otherwise manipulate the human beings that you want to manipulate. Totally possible, seems to me.
Yeah. Final question from Frankie. Richard, how do you reconcile the convergence of CE5 protocols, psionics, and the deeply religious experiences of Chris Bledsoe? Do you see these as humanity collectively discovering a universal interference for contact? And in your view, does this shift towards consciousness-based protocols represent a genuine evolution of the human species or a new frontier for state-sponsored perception management?
Well, it could be both. I'll just say that I personally do believe, I have a lot of beliefs that very much align with a lot of that. I don't often really advertise them, but I personally believe that we live in kind of an intelligent field, if you want to call it that. Call it a God intelligence. It's my own opinion and belief that we are part of that. And furthermore, that there are aspects of our being that go beyond these bodies and can connect to an infinite God intelligence. I don't know how else I can put that. So I believe in something like that. And so when people engage, and by the way, I can't really defend that scientifically,
Mm.
but I can say that it makes sense to me, and I would say there's at least some reasonable evidence that is absolutely the case. Not that we understand it in terms of physics, because I don't think we do, but I think it's real. So what the CE5 people are doing, or Chris Bledsoe is doing, yeah, I'm absolutely open to the fact that at least on some occasions that's real, and that becomes a real thing, and that includes even Stephen Greer, who I you know I raised my eyebrows at what he said in his interview, but the idea of a CE5 connection with another intelligence, I think that's probably right. So is there an evolution that we're going to have where we achieve that? And sorry to pause for so long here.
No, that's okay.
I guess I will say that, yes, I think that if there's going to be a real hope for us as a species, I will say that is a direction that very likely would be a path that would allow us to do that, or would help us to do that. Whether it would be sufficient is entirely different, because we're still competitive. We still have to eat. We still are using up. We're still pushing out other creatures out of our ecosystems. We're still like causing a huge mess, no matter how evolved we think we are. And the other thing is, we have to keep in mind that 99% of the CE5 initiative is basically first world wealthy people with the luxury of thinking, of working and thinking in a spiritual manner like that. Most of the world doesn't really have that kind of a luxury, right? And so there's a sort of psychological preciousness to this that always rubs me the wrong way. It's like a lot of very pampered, I'm just going to say, not everyone who'd like this is pampered, but a lot of them seem that way to me, thinking, oh yes, we're just going to become one with the extraterrestrials, our space brothers. And I just think, man, get a job, dude. get some reality. But the fact is, we are an intrinsically violent species. It's baked into our DNA. We are an intrinsically competitive territorial species. And we have been slowly and very slowly trying to learn how to organize ourselves on a larger and larger scale in a way that siphons that violence out, because it's not going to work when you create a digitally integrated, bureaucratic, rules-based global system. Like, you can't behave the way you did 500,000 years ago. But it's a long process. We are creatures that became what we are through violence. That's our secret sauce. Collective organized violence. That's what allowed us to take over the world. And so that's very deeply part of what we are. It's what gave us our technology. All of it, We were the perennial underdog that learned how to use weapons and took over the world. So that's our strength, but it's a problem, because we're managing a global system, and we've got weapons that can destroy the world many times over in all different ways. And you have to assume, like, how can we actually move ourselves into hopefully a good place without destroying everything in our path? And yes, I think a proper spiritual orientation is necessary. Whether or not it's sufficient is a whole other question. So I can't even remember all of that question, but it was a good question, and I'm glad you asked it, and I hope I answered it at least enough.
There was a lot of great questions, and many of them, most of them, I've not even got to. Richard, we'll leave that one there. Do you want to just let folks know, a little update on your second volume of your USO book, because so many folks asked about that, and kind of how folks can find your work?
It's done. The second volume is done. So the file is just so big, it's so large, and I'm because I'm doing everything on my own. I'm the publisher as well as the author. So I'm creating the index, and I wasn't able to automatically generate the index. Everything just froze. And rather than, I don't know what the problem is. So I'm manually creating the index. It's taking a couple of extra days. I'll get it done. And when that's done, it's the audiobook is done. I had a fantastic reader for that. The book itself is done. It's beautiful. I'm very satisfied with it. It's about 400 pages, just like the first one. It covers all of the 1970s and all of the 1980s. That's it. But you got to believe me, it's an unbelievable dramatic series of events. And I'll just add the 1970s, or more properly, the late 60s to about 1982, 83, about a 15-year period. Something happened in this phenomenon. You were talking earlier, like, are the aliens just going to leave? Well, during that period of time, through the 70s, the activity was absolutely high-pitched at the highest level. And something was going on. There was some kind of operational thing that they were doing. I'm convinced of this, that may have had something to do with us, but it may be totally independent of us. And maybe a new group arrived, something happened, but the activities, the behaviors, so much changed during that period of time that it's extremely noteworthy. So anyway, this book will be out. I hate making predictions for this because I've been wrong every time, but I think certainly within a month from our conversation, it'll be out.
Excellent. Be good to get you back on to discuss that at the time as well.
Yeah, be happy to.
That's all for this episode of That UFO podcast. Thank you so much for listening and watching. If you enjoyed the show, please follow, subscribe, and leave a rating or review wherever you get your podcast. It really helps others find the show. If you're watching on YouTube, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future episodes. You can also support the show directly and get early access, ad-free episodes, and bonus content on Patreon, or by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube memberships. All the links are over at thatufopodcast.com or in the show description below, along with merchandise and more. Don't forget you can also pick up a copy of my book, Atlas of Unidentified Flying Objects, available now in all good bookstores and through online retailers, including Amazon. Big thank you again to all of you for listening and tuning in. Until next time, keep looking up. You never know what you might see.
It wasn't